Hello and welcome to the Secure Start podcast.
So I started writing an awful lot about my experiences as a way to process what I'd been through. That was the second member of staff from school, I guess, that had really noticed something in me. And it was her support that got me through that year. It was essentially a combination of several people noticing me, supporting me, believing in me. I had a lot of protective factors as a young child. I had quite a lot of strengths that I was able to draw from those younger years. But I was able to kind of hold on to some of that. And I think that's what helped me to realise that actually this situation that I'm in, this should not be happening. This is not okay. I deserve better. I can do better. I think that you can go on to live a very meaningful and content life where, you know, the trauma isn't overtaking your day to day, but it's always there. It's always bubbling in the background somewhere, and it is very much a case of managing it, supporting authorities and professionals to open up conversations with parents and carers where they can start to feel safe enough to recognise some of their challenges as parents and to take that accountability with that compassion and that kindness. What we tend to see is that the adults really struggle to keep their calm, and that's where the boundaries actually probably aren't boundaries, they become punishments. And one of my biggest messages is to parents, you say sorry, we all mess up sometimes.
Absolutely.
Let's have
It's
more
so
open
meaningful.
conversations. Yes, absolutely. Say sorry to your children, recognize the mistakes that you made, acknowledge them, take accountability and grow. And that's what I've done, and it's working okay.
Hello and welcome to the Secure Start podcast. I'm Colby Pearce, and joining me this episode is a very special guest with an inspirational story to tell. Before I introduce my guests, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that I come to you from, the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and acknowledge the continuing connection the living Kaurna people feel to land, waters, culture, and community. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. My guest this episode is Dr. Haley Lugassy. Hayley is a senior educational psychologist with Keys Group and the founder of Lugassy Learning Solutions, where she focuses on inspirational speaking and sharing her lived experience to support schools and families. Drawing on her professional expertise and her journey of becoming a mum at 15, Hayley is passionate about bringing compassion, boundaries, and trauma-informed practice into education and parenting. Her work opens up honest conversations about healing, hope, and creating environments where children can thrive. Welcome, Hayley.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And just so you know, I talk to children all day long, so it's a pleasure to talk to adults. And one of the things I do, which I'll edit out, is that when I'm speaking to particularly young children, I don't say the, I say the. I speak,
Okay.
and so as it'll be edited out, but as at the tail end of your bio there, I said thrive, but of course, and then went back and recorded it properly, so as to look like the
That's
adult
fine.
that I am.
I love that. That's very authentic of you, though.
Not that. Well, it's a bit What's the opposite of authentic? To take it out.
Unauthentic. To take it
Pardon?
out, but using it the first time you said it was very authentic.
Oh, well, thank you. I do leave a lot of my faux pas in when I'm recording, but yeah, maybe. Actually, there's nothing wrong, I think, with uh, maintaining a bit of our inner child.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that's really important to connect with our inner child. Yeah.
yeah. I do that all day long. Have a blast with the kids that I see. Yeah. So, Hayley, thanks for coming on. I've been aware of you for a little while now through the parts of your story that you've shared online.
Mhm.
Um, but I really wanted to focus this conversation on recovery and thriving as much as possible, notwithstanding that you do have a story to
Yeah.
tell, as I alluded to. But I thought we could probably just start with, if you could just tell me a little, or tell us a little bit about your story, what you do, um, and how you came to be doing what you're doing these days as an educational psychologist.
Great. How long do we have? This could be a long story. I will summarize the best to the best of my ability. So I think the introduction was great. That really captured essentially what I do. So I am an England-based educational psychologist. I work for a company called Keys Group 4 days a week as a senior educational psychologist, working with independent special schools for children that have social, emotional, and mental health needs. That's where my passion lies, is in supporting children and young people that have experienced or been subjected to traumatic experiences, as well as supporting the adults in those children's lives. I think that's where my passion probably lies, is supporting the systems around children and young people to help them thrive. So I do that 4 days a week. And then outside of that, as you've already mentioned, I'm the founder of Lugassy Learning Solutions, which is my own company where I offer workshops, inspirational talks, and trainings to educational settings and beyond, if they would want me, on anything related to trauma-informed practice and supporting individuals that have suffered. So that's, I guess, a snapshot of the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. I guess the most interesting part is what's led me to do the work that I do. And I love hearing about people's stories about how did you become an educational psychologist. I don't know in Australia, but here we're quite a small profession. It's less than, I'd say, probably 3,000 to 4,000 people. And for me, I was actually drawn to this profession from living in Spain as a child, where, so I am English. I lived in England until I was 10 years old. And then my mother had the idea of moving to Spain. I was asked, Hayley, how do you feel about moving to Spain? And I said, oh, of course, beach, swimming pool, sounds amazing,
Great weather.
sun, of course, yeah, who wouldn't want to? So my mum and I packed up and moved over to Spain when I was 10 years old. And whilst living in Spain, that's unfortunately when life became particularly challenging. And it was when I was 14 years old, I'd experienced something quite traumatic on the night of Halloween, just before my 14th birthday. Had involvement from a school psychologist to support me with that. And as I was leaving the room, following my last session with her, she kind of said to me, Hayley, I was like, well, when you're a teenager and you look back and go, oh, what do you want? Let me go. And she just said to me, one day you would make an excellent psychologist.
Really?
And at the time, yeah. And at the time,
what do you think she saw? Why do you think she said that?
You know what, if I wish I could find her, I wish I could go and ask that question. What did you see in me? What was it? Were you just being nice? What she did share with me was that she felt that I had very good kind of listening skills and that I was very reflective. She didn't use that word with me, but kind of remembering some of the conversations we had, the way that I was able to think about things and kind of try and put 2 and 2 together, make links with things, and really try to connect with my inner thoughts and feelings was something that I potentially found a little bit easier than other young people, perhaps. And she essentially said to me that with what I had been through, as well as being a foreigner living in Spain, I'd experienced bullying. There'd been lots of other challenges of moving abroad, learning a new language, not having any family. So it wasn't just the traumatic event. I think it was a combination of a big move, a big transition. So she felt that my lived experience would be helpful in the future to support children and young people. So she's one of my biggest inspirations. But as I've already mentioned, at the time, I just looked back and thought, who are you? What are you going on about? Shut up. But actually, those words stayed with me. And it was around 4 years later that I decided that I actually did want to take that seriously, and that supporting children and young people was my biggest passion in life, and that I wanted to do what she had done for me. And that's where it all started. So hopefully that gives some insight into where little Hayley in Spain got inspiration to become a psychologist.
It's interesting. It came from another psychologist as well, and I do have quite a lot of the young people I see want to be psychologists when they're older. And some have got very close actually, and really just could have gone on to become registered or finish their training and become registered, but they've gone down another path, but related, but not the same. But yeah, that's a wonderful story of such as of belief in your just noticing something in you that being the word that came to me was introspective when she was when you were talking about that. Yeah. But you mentioned that there was a unfortunate or traumatic incident that happened, and gee, not we're almost on the anniversary of that or just after. um, I am aware, and I guess people who know of you are aware that you had some significantly bad experiences after that point. But I guess what am wondering is what helped you kind of get to that point, that to realize this aspiration. I think you said only 4 years later you'd made the decision, and then the rest is history, so to speak. So how did you go from a very dark place, from what I know of your history, to be studying to be a psychologist?
I'm really glad you've mentioned this, because actually I said it in a way, 4 years later, and that's when I did it. But actually, 4 years is a really long time.
Yeah.
And when you are 14 years old, from the age of 14 to 18, that's a big chunk of my adolescence. So 4 years in the grand scheme of things isn't that long, but actually it was a really, really big chunk of my life. So for those 4 years, until I got to the point of feeling ready to engage in education again, those 4 years were extremely dark, to the point where I didn't think that I would survive. I didn't think that I would continue to be living. That's how dark it became. So to go from that to then actually saying, hey, I can do this. I'm going to do this. That was a significant change. And it was a small step journey, I guess.
Yes.
It was very baby steps. So in terms of how I got to that point, when I was 17 years old, I eventually was able to flee Spain, because during those years I was essentially stuck and trapped in a very difficult relationship, and all of my family were living back in England. So at the age of 17, I somehow found the strength and way of returning home. For me, England was always my home, even though Spain was like a second home as well. And when I came home, I had a little boy who was 2 years old at the time. And he was always my biggest inspiration. He was the reason that I continued to live. I truly believe without him, I would not be here today. And when I returned to England, I had absolutely nothing. I remember getting off the airplane. I had, my little boy in one arm and one little suitcase in the other. I had to leave everything else in Spain, including some very important paperwork, because there was a high risk as I was leaving. So I had nothing. So I had no money, an awful lot of trauma, no qualifications because I'd left school at the age of 14. But one thing that I did have was hope. I was really hopeful that was going to be the right decision. Me returning to England was going to be the right decision. It was absolutely heartbreaking. And there was no day as hard as the day that I left Spain, got on the plane and came to England. That quite literally tore my heart apart, tore my heart out. But I did have hope that we would have a better future. And I think I really needed to hold on to that hope. So then gradually, whilst we became safe and physically, we were both safe, we could start to rebuild our lives together, me and my little boy at that time. And that's when I decided to re-engage in education. So I approached kind of the local council to explore what options I had as a 17-year-old single mum with no money and no qualifications. And thanks to the support that we do have available in England, I was entitled to benefits, which I was extremely grateful for at the time. I was also entitled to receive free education, and as part of that they funded nursery for my son, so that I could go back to school. I could go back to education whilst he was well looked after. So I just want to say out loud, I'm very, very grateful for the support that was here in England that wasn't available to me in Spain. And from there, I returned to education. I did an IT course as the first thing that was available to me, just a level 2. Then I went to college to do my GCSEs, the kind of compulsory, secondary education here. I didn't do massively well. I didn't fail, but I think I got a D in maths, and then I achieved kind of between A's and C's in the other 4 subjects. And it was actually during that year that I discovered a passion for writing. So I started writing an awful lot about my experiences as a way to process what I'd been through. And my English teacher offered to have a look at some of my writing. This was whilst I was 17 to 18 at college. And when she read my writing, she was really inspired, and she actually asked to have a one-to-one with me, where she really encouraged me to keep writing, to keep sharing my story, and she really believed in me. So that was the second member of staff from school, I guess, that had really noticed something in me. And it was her support that got me through that year, because even though I was safe, physically safe, emotionally, I was still really, really stuck, I would say, highly traumatized from my time in Spain. But yeah, it's a little bit of support from the teacher was wonderful. I got through that year. And then during that year, I actually then met my now husband, who is, I'd say, one of my biggest inspiration, my second inspiration after my son, and my anchor. My husband, I describe him as saving me and my son, seeing something in us that nobody else saw. And it was actually him who I eventually told that I'd really like to be a psychologist one day. I said it in passing, not believing that it would happen. And then around a year after that, but we'd kind of got married, things had progressed very quickly. And he just said to me, he said, Hayley, you need to do this. You need to study psychology. I wasn't at the time, I just did my GCSEs, still very, I didn't really have a great job, wasn't really earning much money. And he truly believed that I should study psychology. So it was at that point that he said, let's find a way for this to happen. We discovered the Open University, which is where you can study remotely or online at a cheaper cost than what a kind of traditional university would be here in England. And they didn't require GCSEs or A levels. And to this day, I don't have A levels, which are typically required for university. So he decided that he would actually fund my first year. So he paid for my first year on a monthly basis so that I could start studying. And then from there, I picked up student loans. And then the rest is history in terms of just continued to study. So yeah, it was a long journey. And even that is a snapshot of what it was like. But it was essentially a combination of several people noticing me, supporting me, believing in me, and really pushing me to follow that dream. Because I was the one saying, no, I'm never going to do that. I'm not clever enough. Who would want me? But there were these 2-3 people that really felt that I could do well. And if I hadn't have listened to them, I don't think I'd be here today.
Yeah. It's a marvelous story, and you started doing the summary that I was hoping to do. So I noticed, yes, that there were those 3 key people, and there may well have been others as well. And you described your husband as in terms akin to being like a secure base, and I'm very interested in secondary attachments and earned security after my other passion, which is attachment in children. But yeah, so you had those key people. You also, like, some of it came from within you as well. Like, you're clearly very capable, and you're able to return to education and complete a university training in psychology. And what was the third one I was going to say? So I'm having a senior moment now. And education in and of itself is such an important way to change your life in actual fact. And it's sad that a lot of the children and young people I see who can't be safely cared for at home, or couldn't be at some point, and are placed in out-of-home care, education just becomes can often enough become another re-traumatizing experience for them, particularly because their behavior is poorly understood, and they often get excluded from education when and that only really compounds their challenges, whereas it would be much better off if we could keep them in education. I say to the young people, because the young people often can't see the point of education. I say to them, school's like vegetables. You don't have to like it, but it's still good for you.
I love that. I've not heard that before. I might take that.
Everyone is. I was going to get stickers made up to put on car bumpers, but I can't turn off my entrepreneurial brain for. I blame my dad. But you also talked in there about hope. I mean, that hope that you had, and I was just wondering where that hope came from.
People have asked me this question before, and I genuinely don't know. I don't know where that hope came from. I think it was hope. That was the only thing left. There was nothing else, and it was either feel hopeful and believe that something better is coming, or stay here and die. So there was some sort of fire in my belly that ignited, and that's where that hope came from. I do often reflect on this in terms of how did I get to that point? You know, I wish that I could go back and be a fly on the wall as I was experiencing those things, because I wish that I could share whatever I did with the world so that we could kind of replicate some of those skills that I demonstrated at such a young age. Unfortunately, I can't do that. But something I think for me that potentially was helpful is that I had a lot of protective factors as a young child. A lot of my challenges came from the move to Spain. It wasn't the only challenge, but the most significant trauma was that adolescence. Whereas when I was younger, living in England, I had family around me. I always did very well at school. And I think for me, I was extremely academic at school. I loved going to school. I was a perfectionist, got top grades, had big dreams and ambitions from a very young age to go on to be what I called a boss lady. That was my ambition before I moved to Spain. Before I wanted to become a psychologist, I wanted to be a boss lady. One of those strong, independent, powerful women that walked into these fancy offices with pencil skirts and high heels. That was my dream. And I guess that even though I was struggling emotionally and I was extremely traumatized, I did know deep inside me that I was capable of studying, and that I didn't find studying particularly difficult. Although I'd been out of education, from the age of 14, I had no qualifications. I could read, I could write, I could do that with ease. I could understand things. I always had good communication skills. So I had quite a lot of strengths that I was able to draw from those younger years. And that, I suppose, kind of enabled me to feel hopeful about my ability to re-engage with education and pursue my dreams. Other people might not agree with that, but that's how I make the link between those early protective factors and the kind of hope that I then identified later on.
Absolutely. I think I agree with you that I think that's probably was very influential, that you had already developed a sense of your own worth and competency and adequacy, deservedness. You'd already developed an understanding that people could be relied upon and trusted. Of course, you fell into adverse circumstances, and in those circumstances, those core beliefs were really challenged, and others were probably at play, undoubtedly at play. But then you had, and there may have been other instances, but you had the experience with the psychologist of someone reminding you to believe in yourself. And I just think that I don't think anyone's circumstances are so bad that they can't be repaired in some way, and nor is anyone's circumstances so good that they can't really be knocked about a bit and
Yeah.
And that life is all about where we live predominantly, the influence of positive and hopeful beliefs about ourselves and other people in our world, or quite negative ones. And that really does depend quite a lot on your early experiences, as you described, and contemporary circumstances. And it's a bit of a continuum. You can, or spectrum. You can move backwards and forwards a little bit. Yeah.
I agree.
So yeah,
and I think you've just
go
sorry.
ahead. We're both chatters, I think.
I think we are. I'm containing myself. I'm definitely holding back. But I guess you just touched on, something on there again around how, yes, I think I had those early belief systems about myself and I recognized my worth. And yes, those were absolutely challenged for, good 3 years of my adolescence. But I was able to kind of hold on to some of that. And I think that's what helped me to realize that actually this situation that I'm in, this should not be happening. This is not okay. I deserve better. I can do better.
Yeah.
And I think just something really important for me to say is that I've got 2 older brothers. One of them at the time, so they're both much older than me. One of them is 8 years older. And whilst I was living in that extremely difficult situation, in that abusive relationship for 3 years, my partner at the time did let me speak with my brother. For some reason, there's very little contact that I was allowed with the outside world, but speaking with my brother was okay, potentially because he feared him. And my brother called me from New York, where he lived at the time, every single day and reminded me that I am the most amazing person in the world. He always believed in me. He always thought that I'd go on to be a really successful, inspiring person. And that was from when I was born. He just adored me from the second I came out, apparently. So even during that really difficult time where all of my beliefs around the world were being challenged, I did have this one consistent person, even then, telling me, no, don't listen to that guy. You are a star. And I'm, again, extremely grateful to have him, at that time, because I do feel that I was able to balance out some of that negativity, which was probably really impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it when you said it earlier, but there's that area of endeavor that goes under the heading of the one good adult, and I was thinking to myself, who was the one good adult, through that time? Because the psychologist involvement was just contained, I think, contained to a certain episode. So it turns out it was your brother. You had that.
Yes.
You had his ongoing involvement with you, someone who understood you, believed in you, and in however form he could be, was there for you in those times.
Yeah, I think without him, I think it would have been so much more challenging because I was out of education. There were no teachers looking over me at that point. So the school psychologist involvement had been before I'd started this relationship that was related to a different incident that happened. So by the time I was in that relationship, I was living with this man. I fell pregnant. I had my son. It was just us. It was the most isolating experience I can describe. There's no more isolation possible. And the only small bit of contact with the world I was allowed was that contact with my brother and the occasional, you're allowed out if you've been a good girl. So yes, he was that constant adult, and I hadn't remembered that. So thank you. You've just brought back some positive memories for me.
Well, maybe if he listens to this podcast, he can expect a pretty good Christmas present this year.
Oh gosh, too much pressure.
No, I'm not suggesting you should. I'm not trying to tell you how you should organise your Christmas presents. Yeah. Do you was there any particular challenges that you would be you think would be important to acknowledge, that you think you're almost a bit proud of yourself, or maybe you are very proud of yourself, that you were able to kind of find a way to overcome those challenges?
There were so many challenges, Colby. So many challenges. Are you referring to challenges in terms of the impact of the trauma and how I've been able to overcome those? Yeah. Okay. I'm extremely proud of everything that I've achieved. And I don't mean that in a, oh, look at me, I have a big ego way. I mean that in a, I did that.
Yeah.
I'm standing today, regardless of title, that, that isn't actually important to me. The fact that I'm here, I'm smiling, I have friends, I'm day to day, I experience a lot of joy and happiness, as well as all the other emotions. But generally, I have a really nice life, and I'm extremely proud of that. I think in terms of the most significant challenges following the traumatic experiences, for me, it was that there were two main challenges for me. One of them was around relationship building with others. I had lost all trust in people, even though I knew deep down that people were good, and I was able to interact with people. And I think part of the problem was that I masked very well. I was very, almost like I am today, very talkative and very smiley. But relationship building on a deeper level was extremely challenging, because I couldn't trust people. I'd been hurt not only by my partner, but so many other people within where, the place where we lived in Spain was extremely disadvantaged. So I was surrounded by people who were all suffering, and we all hurt each other. So then when you then move to a new area to start a new life, you don't want to trust anyone. So for me, making friends was extremely difficult. I didn't know how to associate with people. I felt misunderstood. I felt different, like there was something wrong. I was truly believed at the time that something was wrong with me, and I was on a desperate mission to find out what that wrong thing was. So friendships weren't important. It was important to find out what was wrong with me so I could find the fix. I never found it, really. So that was one thing that I had to really work on. And it's been a very gradual process. And, we're talking, I left Spain when I was 18. So we're talking 13 years now. And I would say that only the last 3 to 4 years, I feel like I've been able to form meaningful relationships with others on a friendship point, from a friendship perspective. And it's now such a beautiful thing. I missed out for a very long time on what it meant to have a best friend, for example. So yeah, that's one thing I'm extremely proud of. And then the other thing that I really found difficult was health. I think the health consequences of trauma, something that maybe I feel we don't talk about as much. But as I said earlier, I masked quite well. I appeared to be okay on the outside. The way that I dealt with my trauma was overeating. I didn't exercise. I isolated myself. So physically, I was not healthy. I was not okay. I wasn't looking after myself. I was punishing myself and my body for things that other people had done to me. And it was around 6 or 7 years ago that I had a bit of a light bulb moment. I think it was just after my youngest son was born, where I realized that I had been punishing myself and that I was still miserable. So one of the biggest things I'm proud of is realizing that, and realizing that I was not processing the trauma, and that I was essentially trying to bury everything through overeating, then starving myself, not exercising, looking at the mirror and crying and saying horrible things about my body, all of that stuff. And so I gradually started working on that, and I'm very pleased to say that is no longer an issue for me now. So now I live a relatively healthy life. I eat healthily, occasionally overindulge, who doesn't? But I try to exercise, I prioritize sleep, all the simple things, I think, and that has had a massive impact on my life. So I'm super proud of that as well.
Yeah, that's terrific. But I mean, we're all shaped by our childhood experiences, people say, but I guess I'm not sure how much people delve into that. I guess when childhood is problematic, challenging, there's a lot of adversity, then there's a lot more delving into that occurs. You did mention that there are some in your previous response. You did mention that there are some things that probably haven't been fully gotten over, and I guess, of course, so from my perspective as a clinician working in this area for the last 30 years, I would say that 100% getting over trauma such that trauma never existed is a pipe dream. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
The best we can expect is that it doesn't continue to impact your life negatively on a daily basis. But and I talk about enduring sensitivities. So I wondered about what enduring sensitivities, things that are sensitive to you, and how you manage those things.
Such a great question. I get asked an awful lot whether I think that people can fully heal from trauma. And I have a very similar view to you. I think that you can go on to live a very meaningful and content life where, you know, the trauma isn't overtaking your day to day, but it's always there. It's always bubbling in the background somewhere, and it is very much a case of managing it. For me, there are definitely certain things that bring it up very quickly and very easily. I'm quite open around how I experience heightened anxiety quite frequently, and that's probably one of my biggest challenges still to this day. I have worked an awful lot around, you know, on managing anxiety over the years, because it was debilitating at one point in my life, especially in those early years after leaving Spain. One thing for me in particular is abandonment. And that very much stems from even before Spain, being abandoned by my father as a little girl, moving to Spain, having lots of challenges there with my mum, then that relationship I was in, and also me taking my son away from Spain and almost, you know, removing a key person from him. So for me, anything that could trigger a sense of abandonment is a big issue. And that can be something as simple, Colby, as my husband going out in the car and me not hearing from him for a little while. So I don't know that he's arrived safely somewhere. And you know, a couple of years ago, he would, for example, drive to the drive down the motorway to get to the cinema. Should be a 20-minute drive. If he hadn't messaged me within the 20 minutes exactly, and I would be sat there with my phone with a timer on, I would be having a full-on panic attack, struggling to breathe at the bottom of the stairs in my house, ready to call the police or the ambulance, because I generally thought that he'd died and abandoned me. And that was not a nice place to be. I'm no longer at that stage, thankfully. I've worked a lot, been to therapy, really, really tried to get over that. But it definitely still comes up. There are definitely moments where I have this really horrendous fear that I'm going to be abandoned again. And that's where that little inner Hayley is still hurting a lot. I manage that thanks to therapy and thanks to exploring that. I'm very aware of when those feelings come up. So, for example, today with swimming lessons, my husband took the little one swimming. I noticed that the feeling came up, thinking, oh, they should be back by now. And the challenge that I have is that I live very near a hospital, and ambulances go past my house very, very frequently. So for me, any sort of ambulance, you know, the sirens of the ambulance, that automatically makes me go to the extreme of they're dead. They've had an accident. I've been abandoned. I can't survive without them. And it's very easy for me to fall into panic attacks that will then last for several hours and completely knock me out for the evening. And that can still happen today. Thankfully, during the day, I think during my working day, I'm generally quite contained. It's, you know, I do very well. I've not really had any issues. It does tend to be once I take my professional hat off, that's where the trauma can resurface a little bit more.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yes, I'm a how would you, temperamentally, not as in temperamental, but by temperament, I am a very shy person, and no one believes it except for my wife. She's the only person that believes it. Certainly, no one that I've ever worked with believes it, because I'm so high warmth, high energy. And very sociable. But when you're in certain roles, you almost develop an identity within that role. Now, some people, and that identity can be protective as well. You know, like it'd be terrible if I was a child psychologist and was just painfully shy. That would kids wouldn't want to come and see the painfully shy psychologist, I'm sure.
Well,
But
maybe one or two, but overall you need a bit of a personality, don't you, to work with children?
that you do. And yeah, they never believe I get angry either. They just think, I'm this big, because I am very large, this big, friendly bear type character.
Oh, bless them. That's so sweet though.
Yes.
But I get the same. People can't imagine me being cross or angry because I'm, just go about this. This is, this is me. This is what you get. But yes, absolutely. Come 5, 6 o'clock, that's when I take my professional hat off, relax, and that's where some of those things can very easily
Come back.
resurface.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Do you ever feel like if you knew the real me, if you knew what was really going on?
What would people think?
Yeah, well,
Would
as
people
in,
still want to employ me?
if you, but if it's that, if you knew the real me, it's kind of like some people would say that they're pretending to be someone they're not most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I would
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
say there's a kid in me who wanted to make friends and have fun
Yeah.
with it's like it's part of me. In the same way we've talked
Mm-hmm.
about things have been part of you,
Yeah.
notwithstanding how life has panned out.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I think we're all actors. I think that we all put on different masks throughout the day, and that's just the way it is. I'm very passionate about being authentic. And I don't believe that I'm not authentic at work at all. I think that I absolutely am the person that I'm meant to be at work and the psychologist that I'm meant to be. And I don't feel like I have to pretend to be that person. It's not when I talk about masking, for example, I don't feel like I'm holding the anxiety together to get through my day.
Mm.
It's more that professionally I have a different skill set and I'm interacting with
Mm.
different people. That my trauma in that it's not relevant within that
No.
context. Whereas, of course, when you then get back into your personal life, I take all of that, put it to one side. I'm no longer the psychologist. I'm the wife. I'm the mum. I'm Hayley. I have all these other interests and hobbies outside of psychology. So I think that I'm authentic in most places. To a certain extent, there's always going to be some things that we kind of hide a little bit, but yeah, I believe we're all just actors walking around, putting on different masks depending on the situation we're in. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. I quite enjoy the different experiences I get from doing that.
Yeah, I'm not taking issue with it, but I would say we're channelers. We're all channel, like in different circumstances, we
Yeah.
channel a different part of ourselves, but it is still us.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
some of
absolutely.
my older teenagers who've been through a lot struggle to realize that it's all still part of the same person. It's not not necessarily
Yeah.
other personas or other or alters, but yeah, I think we just I don't think Colby at work is not Colby. It's just Colby at work
Exactly. Yes.
channels another part of Colby, and I think it sounds like you do too. And authenticity.
Yeah.
Authenticity is a bit of a buzzword, I think, that at the moment, but
Yeah.
notwithstanding that, I do think that as time goes on, people highlight different aspects of relating that are important, and I do think that authenticity is one of them.
Yeah, I'd agree
You,
with that.
yeah. Now you on that day a week that you're not working for the Keys Group, you focus on talking to. I mean, you talk to people as part of your role at the Keys Group as well about um, the needs of children at school. Um, you talk to parents, you talk to teachers. I'm not sure if you had the opportunity to speak to child safeguarding authorities. Maybe in your public speaking you do. What what are some of the key messages that you want them to hear about children who are experiencing adversity, and what should they be doing about it?
So I think one of the key things for me is helping the adults that work in the systems around children to really recognize that children are communicating through their behaviors, that there is an unmet need. They are crying out for help and support and understanding. So I'm very passionate about trauma-informed practice. And I know that over here is a bit of a buzzword or a buzz
Yeah.
concept as well. And I think that it can be a little bit blurry in terms of people's understanding of what that means. Essentially, the way that I view it is, can we please understand the impact of trauma on individuals' sense of self, their behavior, their sense of the world, have that understanding as adults and respond with compassion, but also make sure that we do have those boundaries in place. And I think one of the challenges that I'm often seeing here, at least, is that people are misunderstanding trauma-informed practice for permissiveness. So essentially, not wanting to put any consequences or any boundaries or restrictions in place because they fear that could re-traumatize the child, or that could be the wrong thing to do. And as part of my own journey to get to the point where I am, one of the things that my husband was extremely good at as a former police officer in Colombia, he was very good at being quite firm with me. He was very understanding and very kind, but he absolutely put his foot down quite often and said, enough is enough. You can't sit around like this for your whole life, Hayley. And I absolutely feel that was crucial for me to continue developing, because if not, I would have just probably laid on the sofa all day, every day, and not progressed. So for me, that's important to try to translate into the work that I do, is let's be compassionate and kind, but we also do need to put our foot down, and we need to help children and parents and adults that support them to take accountability for some of the things that they're maybe not doing, that's, things that maybe do need changing, or things that aren't appropriate, for example. So that's one of my key messages, is kind of trauma-informed practice with boundaries and accountability is really important for me. And then in line with that, I'm very passionate about trauma-affected parenting, or at least that's what I refer to it as. It's when we've got families that are parenting themselves through their own trauma. And I feel like we often focus so much on the downside, the problems, what the parents aren't doing well. Let's put all the blame on the parents. And then sometimes it will result in the children not being able to live with their parents anymore, and families get separated, and it's extremely traumatic all round. And there's quite a lot of negative narrative still around the parents and the parents and carers. And something that I'm very passionate about is supporting authorities and professionals to open up conversations with parents and carers where they can start to feel safe enough to recognize some of their challenges as parents, and to take that accountability with that compassion and that kindness. And again, that's a journey that I've had to be on myself, where I've had to learn some of the mistakes that I made, and I've had to learn to repair those as a parent. So I guess, the messages that I share are very much from lived experience, things that I've experienced either as a parent or as a professional. Generally, they're quite well received, but I do get some pushback, especially around the consequences, boundaries. I think people don't like the word boundaries, and accountability can be a little bit triggering for people as well.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of a mixed bag on that particular issue. That I can remember standing in front of a group of brand new foster carers and talking about therapeutic parenting, and talking also about responding to the unmet need, or responding to the child's experience. I think it's broader than that. I think it's broader than that. I just say it's responding to the child's experience. And people saying to me, but won't that just spoil the child? And I would be thinking, these are the least spoiled children that are coming, that you can probably think of. I had a similar experience only yesterday, where someone described a young person as, well, they have to get used to with the idea that they can't have everything. And I put it to them, well, this is someone who, by experience, the reality of their life is that they've had so little. So, and they've replaced it with a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. So they've got to move into a house and there's not enough room for all their stuff. But this idea, it was lucky. That was the word. He has to realize how lucky he was to have his current placement where he could keep. And I said, if you know his circumstances, you would think, and I certainly think he's probably the most unlucky young person I've ever met. And yeah, so the other thing that came through in what you were saying across this conversation is the power of relationships to heal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, we were with schools. I think we were having this quick little chat before we started the podcast, but oftentimes schools can be a place of felt rejection for our young people, and because the boundaries are exclusion. What are your thoughts around that balance between accountability for behaviour and boundaries around behaviour, whilst also maintaining connection?
So I know I'm very passionate about, and something that we talk an awful lot around it with my work here at Keys Group is, what is that balance? What does that look like? How can we support children to learn and to not do things that put them, themselves at harm or others at harm, whilst also not being punitive like a lot of our mainstream schools are here in England. I'm not sure, Colby, if you're familiar with an approach called emotion coaching. Which we use here in England quite a lot. So it's something I'm very passionate around, which is very much around, validating, connecting with the child, validating their emotional experiences, focusing on the underlying emotions that underpin behaviours rather than focusing on the behaviour. And if we can do all of that groundwork, as I call it, and connect with the child on that level, we can then put in the boundary or say, actually, no, that's not okay. We don't do that. Or we can put in a natural consequence, for example. But we're doing that with somebody that the child feels safe with. And therefore that boundary, that accountability shouldn't feel traumatic or too triggering. It should be a moment for the child to learn, where they feel like, oh, actually, okay, well, yes, maybe I made a bit of a mistake, but it's safe and it's okay for me to learn from this. And I feel okay about that. And that's where that relationship's really, really crucial. And a lot of the work that we do is around helping the adult to actually regulate themselves in those moments. Because what we tend to see is that the adults really struggle to keep their calm. And that's where the boundaries actually probably aren't boundaries, they become punishments. And that's where it becomes extremely challenging for the child. And that's where relationships are ruptured. And then it's a constant cycle of rupture, repair, rupture, repair. Whereas if we do that groundwork, I think it's much easier to put the boundary in place and then repair if you need to, but hopefully you won't need to as much.
Yeah. I remember being at a conference many years ago now, 17 odd years ago, 18 years ago. Anyway, at that time, there were people from education there and education leadership, and they were talking about how you can't be like the senior leader for wellbeing and the deputy principal at the same time. So in our education system, the deputy principal is kind of the main disciplinarian in the school. The principal is the public face of the school, but the deputy principal is kind of like the strength behind the throne, so to speak, who manages. And then we have wellbeing leaders who are there for student wellbeing. Anyway, it was just an interesting perspective that in school they couldn't see that how, at least the people who were there that were talking couldn't see how you can be both boundaried and sensitive and responsive. Yeah. And interestingly, isn't that what an authoritative parent is like? They understand.
This is it, I think.
Yeah,
this is it. And this is when we deliver our emotion coaching training, we get to a slide where I have the different parenting styles on there. And most people have seen that before, because I think, years ago, before I qualified, there was a lot of discussion about different parenting types. It's no different to that. But I think for some reason we've shifted into, as I said, we either, here in England, I'm seeing either extremely punitive approaches, very much the kind of, children should be seen and not heard. You follow my instructions, you do as you're told. If you don't look, you're sent to detention. And then we've got the complete opposite, which is, oh, I can't put any boundaries in place at all. I don't want to cause the child any more trauma. Like, we can absolutely just take the both, let's merge them together, and you absolutely can, do such a wonderful job. I think part of the challenge is that we've got an awful lot of adults that are struggling themselves, and it's quite easy to flip, isn't it, to either become more punitive or to just be more lenient, because it can be easier in the, not the long term, but in the moment, let it go.
Yeah, and that's one of the themes that's come through quite a number of times on this podcast, that you need to, the first step in trauma informed practice is to look after the adults who you
Yes.
are expecting to provide reparative relationships and reparative care. Yeah, because if they can't do it, if they're preoccupied with their own feelings, their own experiences, they're going to struggle. Everyone will struggle to focus on someone else's experience when they don't feel heard and understood and acknowledged around their own.
Yeah, that's a big part of my role, is to support the adults, and it has such positive impact when there's the time to do it.
Yeah, well, that's again something I don't see much of here, but yeah, that comes through is that adults do respond very well to acknowledgement of their experience of the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you particularly say to parents, teachers, safeguarding authorities to keep an eye out for, to kind of like red flags, I guess, that a child is potentially really going through a tough time?
So I'm extremely passionate about keeping an eye out for the children that are making the less noise. I think that we have children that present in very different ways. And my concern is that we have an awful lot of children that are not communicating their needs through their behaviours, kind of external behaviours. They're not walking around shouting or screaming or punching or swearing. So one of my biggest passions is helping the adults to recognise some of those more subtle signs that actually somebody is really struggling. And again, that comes from lived experience as well as my professional training. I'm very passionate about children that don't attend school for emotional reasons, children that are at home in their bedrooms, not causing any harm in public. And they're the ones that quite often get forgotten about, and that I find very distressing. So yes, it's very much about broadening people's understanding of what a child in pain might look like, because I think we might have a bit of a skewed view of the children that are shouting the loudest, but actually sometimes the children speaking the least are the ones that I feel most concerned about. And so that's one of my main messages to professionals and parents.
Yeah. Did anyone follow you up in Spain when you stopped going to school, that you recall?
No, unfortunately not. We're talking, gosh, how many years ago? 15, 16 years ago. Spain, I think from what people have said, it's kind of 30 years behind England in terms of their processes and so on. I don't remember, we didn't have a social worker. I was almost, they were strongly encouraging me to have an abortion when I fell pregnant at the age of 14. There was a clinical psychologist that sent me home with a doll to look after for the weekend, to convince me that having a baby was challenging. Didn't work, obviously, because a doll was cute and I loved pushing it around in a pushchair. And so the day of the abortion, when I didn't actually go in, that was the last of the medical involvement that I'd had. And then I didn't go to school after that. And there was no knock at the door. There was no telephone call. And I then moved. At that point, I was still living with my mum. And then I moved in with this man, quite a long way away from where I had been living with my mum. And I don't think that anybody knew where I was. I believe that I was missing from the system. Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest challenges, is that I was completely missing. Nobody knew where I was, what I was doing, and hence I was so trapped. Yeah.
I don't want to finish on that note, Hayley. I want to ask you, what what does the future hold for you and your family, do you think? And I know one of the things in our communications that you've mentioned is the book that you're writing.
The book. Yes. So I have lots of ambitions and lots of hope for the future. I'm a very hopeful person. Some key things that I would very much like to achieve on a professional level is to continue developing my expertise in supporting children that have experienced trauma. I'm still very early career, so I've only been qualified for 3 years. So I still have an awful lot to learn. And
I can recommend a book.
Please do. Is it the one I can see on the screen? Yeah, I thought you'd say that. Yeah, I will. Can I have a signed copy, please?
It's good. I need to do another edition. It needs to be updated. But anyway, go on.
Okay, if you want a co-author. So yes, so I want to very much continue developing my expertise in this area. I would very much like to write a book or several. I've always been passionate about writing ever since I was a little girl. That was alongside being a boss lady. I wanted to be a writer. That was my dream, to be a writer and be a boss lady. I don't think I'll ever be the boss lady that I envisioned as a child, but I do believe that I can try to find that inner writer. So I'm very open on LinkedIn and within my talks around, being a young parent and the impact that has had, and the journey that I've had to go through with my son, who is now almost 17, and to repair some of the significant trauma that he experienced as well when he was very little. So part of that is writing a book, proposed title, Sorry Son, which is essentially a book dedicated to him, where I reflect on my life and how I got to the point of becoming a young parent, and how I didn't know what I didn't know, and then how I decided that I wanted to learn and do better. And obviously to get to this point where I think I am a good enough parent, but essentially apologising for some of the mistakes that I made. A lot of people, when I tell them this, they go, "Oh, that sounds really depressing." Whereas actually it's meant to be really hopeful. And one of my biggest messages is to parents, say sorry. We all mess up sometimes.
Absolutely.
Let's have more open conversations. Yes, absolutely. Say sorry to your children, recognize the mistakes that you made, acknowledge them, take accountability, and grow. And that's what I've done, and it's working okay. I'm not saying that everything's perfect, because it isn't. So that's one bit, that's a project that I'm currently working on. It's just taking my time to write it, because it is obviously very emotive, and it's meant to be for my son, with then the wider impact for parents and professionals, and that's kind of secondary impact.
What does he think of that? Does he know?
He does know, yes, and I do talk about my son quite a lot, and he knows that I do, and I have his permission. Hence, I actually waited until I started using LinkedIn and talking more publicly about my experience, because I was very mindful of him, because he's part of our story. This is our story. It's not mine. It's ours. I feel very privileged to have a son that is as passionate as I am about helping people. And he often says to me, "Mum, I love that you want to help people not go through some of the stuff we've been through. And if our story can do that, then yes, let's do it." And he has asked me if he could do some public speaking with me, together, to share our story in the future. I still feel that he's a little bit young. I want him to, become an adult and kind of find himself more before I potentially invite him to do that, because I don't want him to look back and regret doing it. So yeah, very, very wonderful son, and I'm very excited to see what his future is. And then outside of that, so I want to write a book, I want to continue developing my practice. I'd also very much like to lecture. I'm very passionate about teaching. I love sharing knowledge. I love talking, as it's probably quite obvious from this. And when you put me in front of a group of people to talk, that's when I feel potentially the most authentic. I can just, it brings me so much joy, and I take a lot of joy from helping other people work towards their goals. And I struggle to explain how it makes me feel. And the idea of working with adults, especially young adults, and supporting them achieve their goals, work towards their careers, that fills me with a lot of joy. So that's something I'd like to work towards as well. And it kind of links, I'm a clinical supervisor at work, and that's one of my favorite parts of the job is supporting my supervisees to make progress and to reflect on the work that they're doing. So I keep my eye out definitely for educational psychology lecturing positions or guest lecturing positions. Nothing's come up yet that would work for me, but here's hoping.
maybe the right person will listen to this podcast, or
who knows? That would be wonderful.
Hayley, it's been fantastic to have you on. It's been, I think, a really uplifting conversation. Notwithstanding, that there were significant challenges acknowledged. But thank you for allowing me this opportunity to have a chat with you for the podcast.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and I really hope that for those listening, they can take that hope and the inspiration that things can get better. It's a lot of hard work, but things absolutely can get better. So thank you for having me, for sharing my story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.